I'm here today in the frankly spectacular St Margaret in Lee. It's an astonishing church. I remember the first time I saw this church. It corresponded with another first. I took up singing in my later life, in my 40s. And the first choir I ever joined was Blackheath Choir. And the first concert I ever performed in was in this place. I was really nervous about the concert. We were singing a Handel Te Deum, which is absolutely terrific. The Dettinger Te Deum, don't take any other Te Deums. The others are good actually, but the Dettinger was really, really amazing. And so I was nervous and thinking about that. I'd really, really practiced hard. But when I saw this place, my mind was blown. My mind was blown.
It was this guy, Rector Frederick Law, that we have to thank for the interiors. But it was his fabulously well-to-do wife, Lady Adelaide, who actually paid for it. I wonder what first attracted Rector Frederick to the millionairess Lady Adelaide. Today, the Rector Tim Good is taking me through some of the art.
And you get these in the nave, as we're in now. You've got the story of Christ, really from the Annunciation, all the way through to the Great Commissioning, which is at the far end, the post-resurrection appearance.
What does that mean, the commissioning?
The commissioning was when, before he ascended to the Father, he commissioned the disciples to go and spread the good news.
Lovely.
And it's quite interesting that you follow the story all the way around. So you have the Annunciation, you have the birth of Jesus with the wise men, you have the fleeing to Egypt, you have Jesus preaching in the temple, then you have the Sermon on the Mount, you have the water into wine, the first miracle.
It's not in order then.
Oh, it's not totally in order. But then you have the walk, the ride into Jerusalem. But we then don't have the crucifixion, because the crucifixion is at the high altar.
Okay.
And separately. And then the post-resurrection, the Great Commissioning. And then on each corner of the nave are the four gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, framing it.
There's been a St Margaret's Church here since at least the 1100s, although the earlier churches were actually across the road in what is now the old graveyard. And these churches must have been quite prestigious.
There are not one, not two, but 3 Astronomer Royals in this churchyard, the old churchyard. One, Edmund Halley, is incredibly famous.
Yes, Halley is the guy who predicted the return of that comet that we now call Halley's Comet. But he did more, so much more. I don't have time to tell you now. I'd really like to make a video just about him. If I do, I'll leave a link down in the description. But here's how you find his grave in the graveyard.
And there's someone else to do with the sky in this graveyard. It's the grave of the first parachute accident.
Robert Cocking ascended by balloon to well below his target height. But that's not what did him in. He calculated the size of the parachute without calculating the self-weight contributed by the chute itself. And that may have contributed to the outcome, but it seems like the main reason was that the chute was badly put together. Wikipedia says that a larger, stronger parachute might have done the job. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. By 1813, the old church was in enough of a state for an architect called Gwilt to be commissioned for a new building that incorporated some details from the older church, in particular the tower. But do you know what? Churches, solid as they look, often fall down. Really often. Problems with the building had become so intense that by 1837, the new Gwilt church was pulled down. You can just see the outline of the old church in the old churchyard. And architect John Brown of Norwich was commissioned to create a whole new one on the other side of the road on the adjacent site. Over to Tim.
One of the things to draw attention to is the clues in the building that tell you that the choir came later. The choir was built after the main body of the church. The church actually finished where the screen is. And you can tell that by the memorials on the right and left side. Now, that would have been marked the end of the church. So where the pulpit is and across where the screen is, that was where the main window was. The memorials on either side show where the sanctuary was. So that's where actually where the nave altar is now is actually where the original altar was. Also, if you look on the pillars, you can see the marks in the pillars about 2/3 of the way down. That was where the balconies were fixed, because this church had balconies. Yes, all the way around.
Okay, along here. I'm
Which
going
is-
to get my hand in so you can see where I'm pointing. Yeah.
Which is why the south aisle and the north aisle are the same height as the central aisle, was because of the balconies. When they removed the balconies, of course, what you get now is this extraordinary sense of space that lower ceilings on either side would have removed.
Yes.
So one of the great joys of this building is its wonderful sense of scale and space. That came about because it initially had balconies.
So when the extension at the back was done, is that when this decorative scheme was put in place?
Exactly. And if you look, you can tell where the extension was done, because, of course, the ceiling in the main body is wood and it moves to stone in the choir.
Okay.
And yes, and then you got this. So when this building in 1841 was built, it did not have this amazing decoration. That came later when they removed the balconies because they realised they didn't need them. And then...
And this was financed by Lady Adelaide Law?
That I believe to be the case.
Okay,
Yeah. And of course the choir and the Lady Chapel and with the organ, of course, makes architectural sense. And actually, if you look outside, you can just notice where the join is. But it's very subtle. They did a very, very good job.
Everything here has a story. This clock, which is it's a rather fine clock, and the story behind this is that the original was destroyed in the war, and this is the remake. And in fact, bombing had a real impact on this place.
On the south side, this wonderful Victorian stained glass.
And these are the older windows,
Yes.
aren't they? Yeah.
On the north side, in the Second World War, these windows were blown in by a bomb, and the shards of the glass were made into the windows that you see above the north door. And in the 1950s, were commissioned new windows, and they made sure that there was more clear glass in these windows to bring more light in, being the north side. But these four windows are my favourite part of the church. I think it's extraordinary because they're four windows that tell the story of Christianity in this country. The Church of England is a broad church theologically, and there are representatives here from the evangelical tradition and from the Anglo-Catholic tradition. So it starts in Scotland with the arrival of St. Columba in AD 563, and you can see in the fantastic stained glass at the bottom, Iona Abbey, and there you've got Columba arriving on the Isle of Iona. Then you've got St. Augustine, who was sent by Pope Gregory to spread the good news of Christ in the south of the country. And there you see, in 605, Augustine baptizing King Ethelbert in the Church of St. Martin in Canterbury. Then we move along to what was the patron saint of this country up until the Crusades, and that is King Edward the Confessor.
Yep.
And he
Built Westminster Cathedral.
Exactly, Westminster Abbey, not the cathedral, Westminster Abbey. And there you see him looking at the plans for Westminster Abbey. And that's 1066. Then we have Stephen Langton, who is a pivotal figure in the Magna Carta, which of course underlies this church's great history in social justice. And so there you see King John having to sign the Magna Carta in Runnymede in 1215. Then John Wycliffe in 1384, and his great translation of the Bible, and we see the University Church also there in the stained glass. And then we have Thomas Cranmer, and this is the Reformation. Of course, Cranmer was burnt at the stake for his Protestant faith, and we see the burning of the stake actually outside Trinity College in Oxford. And then we have Wilberforce, the great evangelical reformer, and the abolition of slavery. And then, so you've got Wilberforce, who was a great evangelical, and then John Keble, who was the founder of the Oxford movement in 1866. And there you've got the interior of the University Church in Oxford, where he made his great sermon.
So what's the Oxford movement?
The Oxford movement was the rebirth, really, of the Anglo-Catholic liturgical movement of the Church of England. And this, of course, is the Lady Chapel, and in the windows along the side here are all the main female characters of the New Testament. So you have Mary Magdalene, you have Mary the mother of Jesus, you have Mary Cleopas, and all the rest of them. And then and above the altar, you have, in a sense, Old Covenant, New Covenant. You have, for example, the manna and then communion. The manna from heaven being brought to them in the wilderness.
Okay. And
then the food that feeds us for all time, Holy Communion, on the other side. So it's, in a sense, before and after in that window, which I think is really pretty special. And we get that same before and after by the high altar, because you have, in the painting on the left-hand side, you have the Passover, and on the right-hand side you have the Last Supper, which we don't know whether that was a Passover meal at all. It's difficult to say. Some Gospels state it as a Passover, others not quite so sure. But it's made explicit here, again, like that window, the before, the Passover meal, afterwards, the Last Supper.
Have you got 1 minute just to talk about St. Margaret in particular?
St. Margaret is one of those saints that is, there's a huge amount of myth about her.
Yeah, in a good way.
Yeah, but she, but the story goes that she was swallowed by this great dragon, and she cut herself out of the dragon
With the cross, or by making the cross.
Yeah, exactly. And so she's also the patron saint of midwives, which I think is a nice touch. She's not a saint like St. Mary or others that we know
where there's
were
some
real.
historicity.
Yeah.
Historicity.
That's right.
Yeah.
There's a huge amount of myth around her.
So I think I spotted one of hers over there. I think she's in a couple of windows.
Yes. No, she gets around.
There's so much more to say and see. I want to talk about the Pre-Raphaelites and arts and crafts and Gothic revivalism. I want to point out about the tiling and the wallpaper. Crivens, the wallpaper! The delightful young lady who let me in the building said it's like a living room. And she's right. A rich splash of Victorian splendour and self-confidence without being overbearing. The church website, link in the description, is first class. But that's not enough. Cut a class, take a sickie, escape prison and visit. Do it now. Why are you still watching?